Materiał, który za moment zobaczycie, to rozmowa, którą nagraliśmy z Mike'iem z kanału UK Urban Prepper, czyli brytyjski prepper mieszkający w mieście. Tak można byłoby to nazwać. Pierwsza część naszej rozmowy pojawiła się u niego na kanale i link jest oczywiście w opisie pod filmem. Ta rozmowa, tak, jest po angielsku, ale napisy, które my wrzucimy do tego filmu, powinny się w miarę dobrze automatycznie tłumaczyć na język polski, więc mam nadzieję, że po włączeniu napisów będzie to dla was całkiem dobrze zrozumiałe. Mike, it was a pleasure talking to you for the video that is going to be published on your channel. I will definitely link in the description of my video. And I wanted to talk to you about your perspective because I think it's, first of all, the UK is a common place when people move from Poland if they want to build a career abroad. And because of the Brexit, the situation changed a bit. So I wanted to talk to you about how, because from our talk before, I believe that our situations are quite common, quite similar in many terms. But I wanted to ask you what's the most challenging thing that you believe is in the UK right now? Is it the economy, or maybe the political changes, or because I think that there are some issues in the UK, right?
Yeah, I mean, I try not to get too political because you're always going to upset somebody, right? But I didn't hide that I wasn't happy with our recent election. And the politics and the economy are very closely tied. And the cost of living in the UK has gone through the roof. Prepping does seem like a luxury to a lot of people. But which inspired me to do my channel, to say, listen, it doesn't cost you anything to make a plan. It doesn't cost you anything to know what food you can forage. So although the economy does affect us massively and the cost of living over here is just astronomical. For example, the rent prices where I live in the last 3 years have doubled, literally doubled.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, so the cost, you can imagine my salary hasn't doubled.
Obviously.
My salary's gone up between 5 and 10% in that same period. So that's the kind of challenges we're facing.
It's insane. A colleague of mine that's living in London told me that it's nearly impossible to buy anything right now because of the economy, because of the interest rates and how much money you would have to have. So you basically either rent or you basically inherit something. So it's not that common when that young people are actually inheriting something, because your parents are probably alive when you're 30 or 40, hopefully. So yeah, in Poland we have some similar situation, because there's an idea to pay people some money to be able to get the mortgages for your real estate purchases, right? So, which is it is already inflating the real estate prices, so it's much more challenging to buy anything right now that it was 2 or 3 years ago. But it is what it is. So you're saying that the prices of living are going through the roof. So prepping is to some extent a way to mitigate it, right? Because if you're eating the pasta that you bought 2 years ago cheaper than they are right now,
in a way, yes,
in a way to mitigate those changes, but you still have to buy new pasta to replace it, right?
That was my next. That was. I'll give you an example. One popular thing with the preppers over here is the sort of like for canned meats. Obviously, you want your proteins in a survival situation. So canned chili was 90p 2 years ago, and it's £2.10 now. That's so well above inflation. And I know that might not sound like a lot of money to people, but when you're trying to stock up and stockpile, it's all right eating a can of chili. This only cost me 90p, but to replace it's going to be
you're not buying one can, right? You're buying 20 of those.
Exactly.
So it is it adds up. It does. So also one common misconception, maybe not I think misconception, because I know a bit more than an average citizen in Poland, is about the gun laws in the UK, because the gun laws in Poland are considered to be not great, because you need to get a permit, and if you compare yourselves to Americans that can basically buy a gun in a Walmart, it's much more challenging, right? But by the people in the gun community in Poland, we believe the people in the community believe that it's quite good compared to other European countries, because you will get a permit if you fulfill all the requirements. But and in Poland you can actually get a rifle, you can buy an AK or an M16 or AR rifle. They cannot fire the automatic. stripped off the automatic fire option, so you can basically like pull trigger once, one shot, and then you have to pull the trigger again.
Yeah.
But basically, you can buy pretty much everything. You can buy a shotgun, you can buy a pistol, depending on the permit type or permit goal. Because if you have a permit for the hunting purposes, you cannot buy pistol, because for some reason it's considered that it's probably too dangerous, because if you wound an animal and it's lying in the bushes, it's easier to kill it with a shotgun than with a pistol, right? Which is obviously not the case, but this is the understanding. So and people believe that in the UK you cannot get a knife, you cannot get a gun, and I know that it's not the case. It's not true. So I wanted to ask you about it. Is it possible to get a gun in the UK?
So it's similar to yourselves with the licensing situation, and they're separated. So you can have a shotgun license, and you can have a firearms certificate, which would then be like rifles for hunting and for range sports. The one that's completely banned is handguns. We had an incident called Dunblane where it always takes one crazy person that went in and unfortunately shot up a school. Very sad time, but because of that, there was a mass blanket ban on handguns, which was more than people realized in the UK, because people had Webley revolvers left from World War II in their attic and things like that. Myself and my stepdad were Civil War reenactors. We had Army and Navy Colt revolvers that all had to be handed in. Thousands of pounds worth of merchandise just given to somebody to melt down with no compensation offered. The shotguns are restricted. So if it's a pump action shotgun, you can only have 3 rounds in it. So like,
but it can have a longer magazine, but you can only put 3 rounds in it, right?
It can only chamber 3 rounds. So it's either capped off. If it's a magazine based one, it's capped off there, or if it's in the chamber below, it's capped. It's like got a rod in there that only stops you, so you can only load 3 in. So there's restrictions with everything. It's not that hard to get a license. People think it is, but as long as it's just common sense. No criminal record,
obviously.
Have a reason. Don't just say I'm a prepper, so I want a shotgun in case I want to have it. You've got to, part of a shooting club, things like that. So it's similar rules there. Now the knives thing, people don't realize that it's very specific. So zombie knives are banned in the UK.
And what's considered a zombie knife?
Well, a zombie knife is like a serrate, a blade that depicts any sort of violence. If it says "kill" down the side or anything like that, or it's an unusual, it's designed for mutilation. It's like you ever seen these fancy, like a fantasy type style weapons?
Rambo knife, serrated edge and stuff like that.
Rambo knife you'd get away with because it's kind of a survival knife. But if you had a Rambo knife and it said "die" down the side, it's suddenly classed as a zombie knife. Some people think it's just the shape, but it's not. It's if it's got anything to do with printed on the side, anything to do with violence, anything encouraging like violence, you can't have that. You can have a big knife, you can have a Bowie knife, you can have bushcraft knives. I've got a knife from a company called Raven Forge, and it's a survival knife that's the handle just looks like a tube, but so you can attach it and make a spear out of it. All these weapons are fine. Recently, they're going to start to put more of a ban on swords, I believe, after our King's speech recently. But before that, the only swords that were banned were curved blades. So it's you can still have a collection of katanas on your walls. There's no problems with knives. I've got quite a collection myself, to be fair. I'm
not a knife person, but I own a couple of Swiss Army knives, and when I was traveling to the UK, I was always leaving the biggest one at home, not to lose them.
I will mention it's the carrying of the knives that is the issue in the UK. So if you've got a knife on you, the blade's got to be less than like 2 inches. I don't know if that's exact, so don't quote me, but it's got to be a small blade, and it cannot lock. So if you're carrying the knife, it has to fall down. It can't lock into place. You can own these things, and if you're going camping, if you're going fishing, if you're doing something with them, it's fine. But you can't just walk around the streets with them. That's where the law kind of restricts you.
Yeah, so it's easy to mistake it for a complete ban of owning it, because people think that if you're not able to to carry it, why own it in the first place, right?
Yeah.
But it's not the same. I believe that reasonable restrictions to owning stuff like cars, guns, and maybe knives can actually be in place and not violate your freedoms too much, because your freedom ends when the freedom of you waving your hand ends when there's a other person and their face. So some limitations need to be in place if we are supposed to live in a civilized society.
Yeah, of course, yeah. But that's my argument with a lot of things. It's all right, because people are talking about they might be banning crossbows in the UK soon. That's because we've had an incident. Somebody's gone round and killed somebody with a crossbow. As soon as one thing happens in the UK, everyone panics.
Actually,
so there'll be
crossbows
blanket ban.
What's interesting is the fact that crossbows are banned in Poland. You can get a permit for a crossbow, and it's not issued by the different police unit is issuing the gun permits and the crossbow permits. So there's like a handful of people having crossbows permits in Poland, but it's easy to buy one in Czechia, for example, and get it shipped, or you can buy it when you're abroad. And from what I heard from a colleague of mine that's working in an outdoor supply store, they are selling much more bolts for crossbows than it would be indicated by the number of crossbows they sold in Poland. So a lot of people have crossbows in Poland and owning them illegally. What's interesting is the fact that you cannot own it without the permit, but there's no it's not written anywhere in the law what you will be facing if you don't have the permit. So it's forbidden, but it's not said that if you have it, you will spend say month in a jail.
Right.
So in practice, nobody can enforce this law on you because they cannot punish you for it, because there's no punishment written in the law. So it's like
honestly, we've no restriction on crossbows apart from age. So you have to be over 18. That's it. You're over 18. You can walk into a shop and get a crossbow. Now, if you want to hear something really ridiculous, you know Airsoft?
Yeah.
Right?
Love it.
Yeah, me too. You have to have a license to have a realistic airsoft gun in the UK.
Okay. Because it could be mistaken for a real gun, right?
Yeah. So as a 19-year-old, if I was just coming out of university or college, I can walk into a shop, buy a crossbow, a deadly weapon, and walk out into the street with it. However, I can't go and get a gun that fires plastic BBs.
Yeah, because it's black. But if it was orange, it would probably be available, right?
Yeah, you can have the bright orange ones, but who wants to spend all that money on camouflage and run through the forest with an orange gun?
Exactly. What about the cap and ball, like revolvers, the black powder guns? Because they are legal in Poland as well, and they do not require any permits as long as it's a gun that was manufactured in 1885 or before that, or it's a replica of something like that. So you can buy actually Colts or Remington revolvers. You can buy the caps for it. You can buy the balls, the projectiles. You cannot buy the black powder unless you get it registered and get the European gun card or whatever it's called. But you can get some black powder from your colleague. There's no sanction for that. You can buy it in Czechia when you're visiting there. There's no sanction for that. So it's like it is possible, and it's like 200 or 300,000 units sold in Poland already. So we have probably more black powder revolvers and rifles than we have standard modern guns.
For us, they fall under that same handgun rule, because I had a Navy Colt from 1860s and an Army Colt. Both fell under that law. You can have a replica blank firer, but it has to have, the barrel has to be sealed. The barrel has to be filled. Black powder rifles like Enfield musket or something like that fall under the shotgun license. Okay. Black powder itself, there is a black powder license. However, it's similar to yourselves where that's to buy and store it. If I went to a reenactment, I would take my musket, I would pay my subs for the day, and then when it came to the time for the reenactment, somebody would come over and give me a load of cartridges of black powder. If I put half of them in my pocket and take them home, it is what it is, right? But the point is, I can use it, I can get it off a friend and stuff like that. Now, the balls, they don't manufacture because it's supposed to be for reenactors and things like that. However, I mean, you'll know yourself, 1860s, they didn't have many manufacturers. You could cast your own lead balls out of pretty much anything. But I wouldn't advise it if you're going hunting, because the accuracy on an Enfield musket is not that great.
Yeah. I have one other question I wanted to ask you, because obviously to sustain our lifestyle, we need some power, right? And in Poland, we get it from the coal mostly. And when people are building their own power supply in case of emergency, they are either focusing on buying a generator and some fuel for it, or buying some solar panels that will work for half of the year probably. So they also need the generator to have power in the winter. I was wondering, what's the most common approach in the UK? Because you have probably less sunny days than we do in Poland, but on the other hand, you don't have much snow in the winter, so it might be the conditions for the solar power sources might be a bit better in the winter than in Poland, I think.
I would say the most common is the solar. A lot of people have solar setups because even when they're not preppers, because the power they generate, it's the cost of living again. It saves them a lot of money, and any overpower gets trickled back to the grid, and they get a premium for that. So solar would probably be the most popular, but probably is not the most efficient. I recently spoke to somebody on my channel who owns like a glen in Scotland. He's completely off grid, and he has a little hydro generator in a river. So he has solar through the sun, and then through the winter, the river's providing his hydro energy. So solar is probably the most popular, followed by fuels. But you've got to bear in mind it's very close in the UK, and a lot of people don't have the space for a generator. And even if I had a diesel generator, my neighbors are so close, they would not be happy if I was running.
To say the least, right?
Yeah, to say the least. And we obviously, if it was a situation, then you don't want to be running a loud generator, right?
Definitely, because it's like putting a neon sign on top of your head. I have stuff, come here.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas solar doesn't do that, because since the initiatives, it was like government schemes years ago where you could get them done for free on your house. And but you didn't make any money. They got all the trickle back. It was a great scheme because it saved you money. But because of that, they're everywhere. So it wouldn't raise alarm bells. That,
definitely,
yeah, you know. So yeah, that solar would be the most popular, I believe. Expensive though.
Yeah, but what can you do about it, right? In Poland, we don't have good conditions for the wind turbines. I mean, the huge wind turbines like that are put on top of the 200 meters tall tower are quite common, but the ones that are built on top of the roof of a house, they're not very common, because the conditions like close to the surface are pretty poor. So they're not really used. The hydro turbines are not used at all, probably, with some small exceptions in places where they were built 100 years ago. So there was some infrastructure that there was some water, not container, but a pond of sorts.
Yeah, like a reservoir.
A reservoir, yeah, exactly the word I was looking for. And then it had a water mill or a water turbine built back in the 1920s by the Germans, probably.
Yeah.
Because it is, you need to get some paperwork, some permit in place to build your own water energy source. So you cannot do it. I bought a small shipment of what's it called? Water Lily, the portable water turbines. I bought like 12 of those and sold them in the course of 4 years because they were not really popular. Obviously, they were really expensive and not providing that much power. And it's also the fact that we don't really have that great conditions, like geographical conditions for the water the water power, small scale water power, because the bigger water turbines were already built.
Yeah.
judging by the name of your channel, a person that approaches you for the first time will probably assume that you're living in a city and you're focusing on the urban survival, right? Or getting around in case of emergency in a city. And because my situation is a bit similar, I wanted to ask you what you think is the biggest challenging there. Because my personal experience is, maybe not experience because I did not experience it, but my personal observations that or expectation is that the most challenging thing would be to evacuate from it. So I assume that I need to get out from the city as soon as possible in order to be safe. But I was wondering if maybe you have some other observations.
Yeah, I mean, evacuation plans obviously are always in the back of my mind. I'm quite lucky where I live is urban but suburban. It's not directly in the center, it's slightly out, but it's still quite densely populated. My biggest concern, apart from the reason it's called the urban prepper originally, is because I'm in a small house and everyone I looked at on YouTube had a giant homestead. So I was trying to say, right, in a small house you can still do this and clever ways to store things.
Sure.
But people is my biggest concern, because it's still a very fringe thing. It's very rare for preppers to be. If I've got a prepper in the 2 mile, 3 mile radius of me, I'll be surprised.
A single one, yeah.
Yeah. So in an SHTF situation, it's all these desperate people that is my biggest concern. If my plan is to bug in, then that's my biggest challenge.
Yeah, I love the fact that people are always telling me that, so the civilization was built without power, right? Without refrigeration. So you can live without it. But
100%,
if we lose power, it's not the matter of the fact that the food is going to be spoiled in your refrigerator. You are going to face a lot of hungry people. Maybe not face directly. They're not coming. They may be not coming directly to you for your stuff, but the secondary effects of a blackout, people being starving, people being left out with no water, no means of hygiene, this will affect you. Not the fact that you don't have anything to eat, because you do, you probably do, you are stocked up, or you think you are. So and people often forget about it, I think, because they think of themselves like that their family is the entire universe. There's nothing around them, which is not obviously the case. But it's because of the prepper porn, all the zombie movies, zombie games. In the case of zombie apocalypse, we all believe that we will be the ones standing on top of something shooting zombies from above, right? But in reality, we will be one of the zombies that are being shot at.
The odds are.
But yes, it's a misconception. And like I said, the prepper porn, it's nice to play all those games and envision yourself being the good guy in it, but it's not going to be the case. You will probably be on the other side of the barrel, on the other end of the barrel.
Yeah, everyone's the hero of their own story, right? So every prepper thinks they are going to be survived. But I mean, I think that is the right mentality to have, to a degree.
It's optimistic, right? It fuels you to be optimistic, and because of that, you think that you are more likely to live through the catastrophe than you actually are, which is good. What's also challenging, I think, is the fact that when we are reading some like stories from the war, right, or even the war in Ukraine, right, which is quite fresh. So those experiences can be transposed to the Polish people really well, because they're really fresh. So what works there will probably work here. But it's if you're focusing only on learning what the stories are of the people that lived through something, you are missing all the people that maybe did exactly the same things and died because they had less luck, right? Because they were in the wrong place in the wrong time. So maybe they were doing exactly the same things, and you think that this is the way to go, but it's not the case. This thing that might be separating you from being dead is only a matter of luck and not anything else. But that's unavailable, I think. You cannot avoid it, I think.
That's a fear a lot of preppers have, that lack of control, right? So you do what you can to prepare. I do recommend to everybody in the UK, anywhere, to watch a film called Threads.
I love it.
This?
Yeah,
this is the most gritty, realistic kind
gruesome.
of gruesome. Yeah, and the effects aren't great. It's an old movie, so you know, but it is what it is. But it's the most like, oh crap, and the bit when you watch it, I've been in the military in the UK, and I've seen the pamphlets that say, in the event of a nuclear blast, lie down and put your hands over your head. Wait for the second wave to pass before you get up. That's that's the advice. But you saw that on that film, using the government advice to like make shelters and put your doors up against the sides, and it just shows you how ineffective something like that would be.
The quite common idea in Poland for that is that in case of a nuclear blast, you are supposed to lie down, cover yourself with a sheet, preferably white, and then crawl slowly towards the nearest cemetery, slowly, not to cause panic.
Yeah, bury yourself. Yes,
it basically sums up the amount of things that are provided by the Polish government for the people in case of an emergency like that. Mike, it was a great pleasure talking to you. I always love to understand the perspective of other people because, like I said in the beginning, I think there's more. We do have in Poland and the UK, we do have more things in common than we have differences, and it's not always the case that something that works elsewhere will work the same with the same setup here, but it's always nice to understand what people are doing and what works for them, because you can then amend it and fit it into your strategy or your own survival plan.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's great to get to know other people from other places as well, because in the UK, with the cost of living, people are looking to emigrate all over the place. So the more we learn about each other, the more choices we have.
Poland is fun, not in terms of the weather, but because we have like, because of the climate change, it's going to be a dry season and a wet season, not snowy season and warm sunny season, but dry and wet. So, but you're more welcome to come here. It's great. I always entice people to come to Warsaw, to Poland. Maybe not specifically Warsaw. It's not the best place to visit because it was basically destroyed during the Second World War. Actually, we have another, my goodness, difficult word, 80th anniversary of the Polish Warsaw Uprising that started on August 1st, 1944, which in the result caused the Germans to destroy the city. So there's not much left of it, and we have a great museum for that. I mean, great in terms of its informative value, but I hated every minute of being there because of the scale of the disaster, and you learn it reading through the people's like letters. It's something on one side recommend everybody to go there, but on the other side I tell them not to. A pleasure talking to you. It is. But it's like, we all believe that it's going to be fine, right? If it's not fine, if it's not great, it's not the end of the road yet. So we all try to be optimistic. And I think it's great. Personally, I love to be a pessimist because I'm either right, which is good, or I'm wrong, but I'm surprised in a good way, in a positive way. So
either way, it's
a better strategy. Like I said, a pleasure talking to you. And maybe we can catch up in a couple of years and see how the situation changed, because it is going to change. Look what happened in the last 5 years, right? We never anticipated it, and it did change the world entirely.
That's it. Maybe if I visit, we can do it in person.
Definitely. It's actually a great idea. Let me know if you ever come to Poland. We can schedule something. Cool.
Definitely.
Take care. Have a great night.
Thank you.